Hello artists, artisans, crafters, welcome back. This is Miss Darling in the studio.
And...
Hi! Guess who's here?
I'm trying to figure out what you can't see. You can't see. Oh wait, oh my hands look so busted. Your nails are so nice!
Yes.
Mine are not
How come
nice.
yours are not nice?
And I got a cat scratch.
Let's hide them.
Hi everyone. Hello.
This is my daughter Swoop, everyone.
Hello. How are you?
So, we're happy you're here.
Yes.
And,
to bother you.
yes.
And pester you.
I'm working on part 3 of our decoupage vase.
Very nice.
And you know all the vases I've got around the house.
Yep.
So I'm teaching others to do the same thing.
Are these items you will be using today?
These are my ladies.
Very
yes.
nice, ladies. Looking
Very ladies.
good.
And we're going to be working with fabric for the first time as a background.
Well, that's pretty.
Isn't that nice?
That's exciting.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to work out, but we'll give it a shot.
You will make it work. I have all of the faith.
Well, we'll do our best, that's for sure.
Yeah.
May take a lot more acrylic in between and so on and so forth to make it non-porous. This is going to be more porous than paper, I assume.
Yeah.
But we'll take it as it comes.
Well, I'm excited to see how it works.
Thank you.
All right, everyone.
So nice of you to stop by.
Bye, hi, and bye. Enjoy your crafting.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, so let's get at it. As I said to Swoop, I have decided to use fabric for the background of the outside. I've never done fabric before. I'm trusting that it'll work out okay. And I have these two beautiful ladies that, here. These two beautiful ladies that are going to be my focal points, and I will decide later on what my connection, or I should say my connecting images will be to, you know, that I put on the sides or around to take care of various issues I may have or to direct the eye in a specific direction. And so I'm going to use this more solid paper for the inside of the vase, and then this will be the outside. And I've already tested this against a larger piece of fabric, and my focal points will be easily identified, and that's the main thing. You don't want your focal points to get lost in the process. Now, I'm going to be using Minwax's water-based polyacrylic protective finish. This is what I've used on all my vases, but as I said in part 1, I'm sure you can use Mod Podge or any acrylic finish, and I recommend a high gloss. This is clear gloss, and I do recommend that because in the end I want my vase to appear to still be glass. And you can use matte if you choose to, but if you want it to look, you know, shiny like clear glass looks, then you'll want to use a high gloss. And so that's where we're headed. Now, as I said in part 2, and if you have not watched part 1 and part 2, I would strongly advise you, before jumping into a project like this, that you go watch those 2 videos so that you're well grounded in my technique and design ideas and tips. And so in part 2, I stated, and I will try to put the links to both those videos in the description box below so you can find them easily. But anyway, I said in part 2, we're going to start off with taking care of the base of the vase. And so here's what you do. You just find something, an image, or, you know, it doesn't have to be an image. You could just paint the bottom a specific color. When I painted images, rather than doing an image, I always chose black acrylic paint. But, you know, of course it could be any color that you want. And so what I'm trying to do right now is to get that image there fairly centered on the bottom of my vase. And it's a little tricky, and I should probably stand up to do this because you do get a different perspective when you're looking at something at an angle. So that looks pretty good to me. And so I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to draw an outline around this, the base of my vase, so that I can cut it out and have it be pretty much, well, it will, you know, it's going to be a little bit bigger than the actual base, but I don't mind that. I'd rather it be a little bit too big than to be too small. Because if it's too small, there's not much you can do other than to cut out something new. So here's my paper, and I'm just going to carefully cut around this, try and get as even a cut as I can, and I'm cutting right on top of the line, which will put me slightly larger, but not by very much. Now this could be, you know, you could maybe have a doily that you use on the bottom, and if so, then I would recommend that on top of the, you know, glue the doily down, and then after that put a dark color behind it so that when you're looking at it from the inside afterwards, you can clearly see the design of the doily. No point in having a doily with a really nice design only to not be able to even see it because the background is too light or too close to the coloring of the doily. So I'm just gonna trim off some of this where I got a little bit outside the line. Kind of even it up a little bit. Okay. Well, I'm not perfectly centered, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that. Alright, now, before you do anything, it's a good idea to take an alcohol wipe, or, you know, dip a clean cloth in some alcohol. And what you want to do is wipe down your vase inside and out to remove oil and, you know, prints and things of that nature, just to make sure you have it as clean as possible. I mean, invariably you're going to still get prints on it, but no sense in having more of them there than need be. And be sure and do the outside bottom, and then come and do the inside. Okay, and then I'm just going to roughly go over the inside bottom. Nice thing about alcohol is it dries and disappears instantly. So, see, I got a bunch of dirt off that, you know, you don't want that to stay on your glass, and you know, it just will negatively impact the enjoyment of the imagery if it's dirty. Okay, so here's my bottom, and so I like to use these little they look like rubber, but they're actually sponge applicators. I buy these in a quantity, and you can get them at Walmart or probably just about anywhere, especially anywhere where they do arts and crafts. So, you know, Michael's and Hobby Lobby, and you know, even Home Goods or Lowe's would have these available. And so you want to make sure that it is small enough to go into your container of acrylic. This is what we're using as our glue, and we're going to be putting it on the bottom and the top of everything we do. So the first thing I really need to do is to stir this up. It's been sitting for a fairly long time. I forgot to get some wipes. All right. Okay, so we're dipping in. Oh, I wanted to stir it. So let me find something long. I'll use a long paintbrush. So you don't want to be aggressive with your stirring, because you don't want it to form bubbles. But you do want to stir it each and every day if it has sat for a number of hours without being used. Then just make sure you stir it up again. Okay. And I think I will put a protective bottom underneath on my work area here, because I guarantee you there will be dripping. And I don't need to put this on a stand yet because I'm just dealing with the top. So I'm going to, just put a fairly generous amount of acrylic on the glass itself. And then I'm going to lay my top in there. There is a slight ridge along the outside of the bottom of my vase. So I'm pressing the paper down against that. And you want to do a good job of pressing it down, because when you start to put a coat on top of it, you don't want, you want to lessen the chance of bubbles forming. So I'm trimming off it's pretty it's pretty difficult to get something laid down in there perfectly in the center, and so you probably will find that on one side of your vase it's going past the edge of the bottom, and on the other side it's kind of laying in there, maybe a little bit on the short side, but don't worry about it, because this is all going to be covered over by the time we get done. It'll all be covered over, and you're really not even going to notice anything down here on the bottom that may be slightly off. So I'm not even worried about, having any kind of jagged edges along there. It's not going to show in the end. Now I like starting in the center and pulling out from there. And you do want to watch for if there's any bubbles forming, so you can kind of poke them with a pin and get rid of them right away. And you might luck out. Now if you are having trouble, I'm using rice paper, and rice paper is a lot more flexible. It acts not as good as fabric, but is rather, bendable, can work with it a little bit. The rice paper that you cannot do with regular paper. So if you're using regular paper and you're having trouble getting it to lay down flat, then take a blade and make some little cuts all along the diameter so that part of the paper can overlap what's next to it, and that will help it lay down flat. I wound up with a little bit of a crease right here, but it's no big deal. Now, in terms of how much should you put on, it's better to do multiple layers. Let me rephrase that. It's better to do multiple thin layers than to do one thick layer. So keep that in mind, that this is all going to have to dry before we proceed with doing the sides of the vase. And this acrylic top coat will help protect the paper, so as you're working with it, hopefully you don't pierce it in any way and whatever. And I do see some little bubbles that appear to be forming, so I'm just going to take a straight pin and kind of poke at that to give the air a place to escape to. And if you have a heat tool, like I do, and you want to speed the process along, alright, it's dry now, and so I have taken a piece of a paper towel and I have cut out my circle, and so I'm going to lay down another layer of acrylic and then press that in place. I should have done it this way on the actual design piece, but it's been a while since I made one of these. A couple of years at least. And I somewhat forgot my process. Now the reason I'm putting down a piece of white, it could be a thin piece of, regular copy paper or something, is because the rice paper that my design is on is a little bit transparent. Not a whole lot, but you could see a little bit through it. I recommend, especially if you have a light design, that you go with white on the back initially, because you don't want to darken up the background unless you're doing it, as I said before, because of a doily where you need that contrast for a design to even show up. But I'm putting this white on just to have another layer there to make the bottom opaque, so that when I start working on everything else that's going to overlap onto this, none of that shows through when you're looking through the vase toward the inside. I hope that makes sense. It probably will as we get further into this and you start to understand more. And this is going to need to dry as well before we proceed on. So if you haven't really started getting your supplies ready, you could go ahead and put the paper on your bottom and let it start drying, you know, just air dry. And while you're working on everything else, like getting your paper ready for the inside, the sides of the inside, or anything else that isn't already pre-cut or torn and ready to go. Okay, so you can see that now I'll just explain. As you are working upside down, this is going to be on a stand, so the vase is, you know, the top, you know, the bottom of the vase is going to be at the top of my working area. And as I'm putting paper or fabric along the side to cover the sides, I'm going to wrap it over onto the bottom. And so, you know, you'll have various papers, or in my case fabric, that's going to be overlapping and coming over from the side up and over. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that what I have down initially is going to be opaque enough that it's not going to be seen at all when everything is done. And I have put a light, kind of an off-white paper on top of the original paper, so that hopefully that will remain looking nice and bright and not go real dark on me. So turning it upside down but not putting it down, you can see now that's what it's going to look like, what the bottom's going to look like from the inside of the vase once we're all done. Okay, so I'm going to put that up there and we're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and proceed with putting the background paper on the sides that will show on the inside. We're working in reverse. We're doing the inside first and then the outside. I'm not going to be able to move my camera and so I'm going to have to still work and talk about what I'm doing and then kind of show it to you after the fact. And I hope you don't mind. If I move my camera, I'll never get it back where I need it to be. So all I'm doing now is I had some of the acrylic drip down and form a little drop along there. So I'm scrubbing all that off. It's going to dry clear anyway and probably wouldn't show, but you know, I just don't like knowing that it's there. So, okay. Now here's my stand, which I showed you in my first video. The stand that I made for these larger vases. You need something to put your vase on that is taller than the vase, but thin enough to go inside the vase. And so that is messing up my, it's messing up my now it's in focus, but you can't see what I'm doing. I can see this isn't ideal, but okay, let's kind of pull out a bit. And remove some of the debris I have sitting around. Okay. It looks like it's out of focus, but I don't think it is. I think that's just the look of my paper. So what I need to do now is to dry this. All right. Now, the first thing to go on the sides will be the background for the inside. And here is the paper, and I've already pre-cut this in 2-inch strips, making sure that I keep them in the exact order that I cut them in. And so I'm going to take these one at a time, and I'm going to be gluing them . Okay, I'm going to be gluing them where they overlap by about 1/2 inch, and then I'm gluing them all the way down the side, and so that I have a portion hanging down below the rim of the vase. That will be trimmed off later, but you want to have it come all the way up to the rim and be very securely glued to that all the way around. So all I'm going to do is start up here, and I'm going to run a straight line of acrylic all the way down the vase, just a little bit wider than my strip. And this base here is going to catch some of the drips that happen. Now you need to know, for the second strip onward, should you glue it down to the right of your first strip or to the left. And so you have to check and see and you want to try to have it, you know, push it down in place as vertically as possible. I just eyeball mine. And then at the top, I'm just pressing it down to the top of the vase, and you should have a I recommend that you have a burnisher that's a roller to roll against the paper to get it nice and flat against the surface of the vase. And you come up and roll it over, carefully roll it over the top as well, and get a nice well glued strip. And after that's done, you want to put a coat on the outside of your strip, and starting at the top, come over and pull the acrylic on down the length of your vase. In order to have the best control, I recommend having an applicator that's not excessively wide. The wider it is, the easier it is to, you know, just spill stuff all over the place and make a huge mess and not be able to control what you're doing. So come on down and go past, and you know, you don't want to be putting acrylic on after it has really started to dry, but you do want to make sure that you have appropriately covered the whole strip, first on the bottom and then on the top. And then you're going to take strip number 2 and starting at the top, run your acrylic down the length of the vase, overlapping a little bit onto the first strip. We don't want to see any open areas from strip to strip. And I overlap about 1/4 of an inch or so and press this on over. Make sure that it's nice, that it lays nice and flat over the edge of the bottom, and that it's lying completely flat all the way down the vase. This does get a bit messy after a while, so you want to make sure you have, you know, some adequate protection at the bottom to catch all those drips. And then I burnish over the overlap first and make sure that's nice and tight. Okay, now let's tip this a bit so you can see what I've done. There's my first two strips, and it hangs lower at the bottom. That's okay, that'll be trimmed off. And this paper, one of the problems, I forgot about this, one of the problems of working with some of the rice papers, not all of them, but some of them, they can tend to, when you use a burnisher over it, some of the paper lift off. And so you do have to, you know, watch out for that. Just make sure that they overlap well and there's no gaps there. And so you're just going to continue on putting strip after strip on until you've gone all the way around the vase. And I'm going to do one more strip, and then I will take a break from filming and finish this off camera. I don't think you need to sit here and laboriously see me putting on. It's going to take about 24-25 strips. You need to know the outside, is that the circumference of your vase, and then if you divide that by 2, you'll know roughly how many sheets you'll need. Now you're going to need more strips than just dividing your circumference by 2 and cutting that many because of the overlapping. So my vase is around 19 inches around on the outside. So dividing that by 2, 10 times 2 inches is roughly 20 inches. But because I have overlaps, I'm going to need probably at least 2 extra strips, maybe even 3. Whatever paper you choose to use for a background, know that you're going to need a few extra strips to account for the overlapping. And so make sure you have enough paper to adequately do it and even have a little bit left over. Okay, my signal went off, so I'm going to stop my video here and continue on until I'm done, and then I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. I have finished wrapping the entire vase with my inside paper. Now, I forgot to mention that if you're working with a paper that has a design on the front, you need to glue it, adhere it face down on the, when you're decorating for the inside. You want to do it face down. And so you cut your strips and then attach them with the image face down against the glass. It didn't matter for me because I have, you know, this modeled paper that is in the process of drying, but there's no image on it. It's just, you know, it reads like just a plain solid color. And so it didn't matter for me, and that's why I forgot to mention it. But hopefully you figured that out on your own. And if you haven't started yet, then good, I'm telling you now. For the inside, you attach your imagery face down. Even if you don't have imagery that's separate from the background paper, you still put the background paper on with the good side, the right side facing the glass. And the other thing is, it can be a little tricky if you're working with 2-inch strips like I was, to get it to fold down properly over here, over the, you know, the lip. This is, you're looking at the bottom. And so when I'm working on it, I have this at the top of my stand, and that can be a little tricky. So if you're having trouble getting that to lay flat against the vase, against the glass all the way around, then clip it about 1/2 inch. Just take scissors and cut it about 1/2 inch, and that way then you can push down one side and then have the other side overlap, you know. So it's kind of, instead of trying to go down like this, you know, one side's overlapping the other, and that way you'll get it to lay down nice and flat for you. So those were 2 things that I think I didn't mention earlier. I wish I had. And but I will hopefully remember to tell you that via text within the video. So now I've got the background for the inside all done and adhered, and I'm letting it dry. And the process for putting on the outer is the same, only instead of, for instance, if this was your paper for your inside background, you would want to have this facing the glass. And let me move this over. So you'd want that facing the glass if it's the inside, but obviously if you're now switching to the outside, then you want to glue the back on so that the image shows outward when you're doing, you know, the outside. I mean, we're working on the outside of the glass no matter what, but you face inward when you're doing something that's going to be seen from inside, and you face out when you're doing something that will be facing outward. Just remember that if your vase is on a stand of any kind, this is not the top, this is the bottom. So when you, and this is especially important if you're got, you know, a fabric or paper that has a design on it, and it's directional, you want to have the top of your image down here. So I will be taking my fabrics that I'm working on, because this is a design, and I'm going to apply them upside down. It's upside down to me simply because my vase is on the stand. so that, you know, I like to have my flowers pointing upward, and so I want to, you know, make sure I turn my fabric so that the top of my fabric is being put on down here, and the bottom of my fabric is being put on up here. I hope that makes sense. I know it can be confusing. Yeah, but that's why I said, I think it was in part 1, maybe part 2, that it's really important to remember you're working on a substrate that's upside down, and because we want the drips to come off this way. We don't want the drips coming off the bottom and making that uneven. And besides that, we need to set the vase on something taller, and obviously there's only one way it will go on, and that's upside down. So when I go to put my ladies on, I'm going to be attaching them upside down. Okay? And that's a really, really important aspect to keep in mind, because otherwise you'll be very disappointed. You will not be able to use your vase as anything other than an upside down stand. You won't be able to use it as a vase. Well, I suppose you could, but all your imagery will be upside down if you forget. So please, please remember that. So, I guess that's going to be enough for part 3. You can anticipate where I'm going with this, and we should finish up in part 4. I will be putting the outside on, and the outside focal points, my borders, any other imagery that I decide to add, I'll do in part 4, and then give you instruction on what you're to do to really secure everything and make it look professional and just like a work of art on glass. And so we'll do that in part 4. Be sure to come back. And a reminder to those of you who may be watching this for the first time, be sure and watch part 1 and part 2 before you jump into this, and that way you'll make sure you have all my tips and guidelines and warnings. Especially warnings, you want to get those. So thanks for being with me and for going through this journey, and I'll see you again in part 4. Be sure and give the video a like and a comment. Would appreciate it. This is Miss Darling calling this a wrap. Bye-bye.